All right, we are sending data and we are streaming. We are live. Welcome, everybody. This is going to be a special bonus episode of the RPG Academy where we're going to be taking some time. Myself, Tom, faculty member for the RPG Academy, and then we are blessed to be joined by one of our fellow network members, Kalum. Introduce yourself real quick for the people who don't know you.
Hello, I am Kalum from London, like Federico. I am the host of. Sorry, I'm the proud father of this little
Oh
fellow,
man, these bonus points.
and I'm the host of the proudly London-based Rollis podcast, which is dedicated to tabletop RPG fans across the channel, the pond, and beyond.
Very cool. We're glad to have you with us. And then our guest of honor today, Federico, the designer of Nibiru RPG. And am I pronouncing that right?
Yeah, I
Nibiru,
mean,
Nibiru,
it's one of those
Nibiru.
things that
There you go. I really do. I gotta say, I told you I saw this system about a year and a half ago. I fell in love with just the art. It was absolutely fantastic. It sucked me in. And then when Caleb said, "Hey, I know this guy. Do you want to talk with him?" I was like, "I have to." So you know what? Real quick, introduce yourself for the people.
Okay, yeah, I'm Federico Sohns. I'm Argentinian born, and I've been in London for about 3 years so far now. I work at the RPG department of Modifius as an assistant line manager, and I've been working on Nibiru probably for almost my entire stay in London. It's been a wild ride.
That's amazing. That's incredible. We have a real life Modifius professional with us here today.
Yeah,
Fantastic.
they're real.
The real deal. So
they're real, and they're all in London.
They are. So let's go ahead and then Caleb, feel free to jump in whenever. I sent you those. We're just gonna kind of go back and forth. We're all a bunch of RPG nerds, just having a conversation. That's the way I like to look at things. So, but Federico.
And if there's anyone on Twitch, they should send us their questions.
Oh, absolutely. I should have said something. Yeah. Anybody watching us, shoot us those questions for Federico, and we'll make him answer them. Right?
Yeah.
Or he'll try. All right. So, how did you wind up in this wonderful, weird world of tabletop RPGs? Put us in the time machine. Take us back. Tell us how this journey started.
Okay, so it started when I was about 15 years old, and then a friend of mine called Dan, we kind of started delving into Warhammer Fantasy roleplay. We had this very wacky campaign in which I was a GM, and I also had the one character for myself, and he had a character, and we just rolled with the punches and did a strange story. And from the get-go, I think that we did have this thing for tweaking stuff and design our own stuff, because we started to come up with ideas of how mechanics would reflect the fact that we were brothers. So maybe one would be at risk at some point, and that would prompt an emotional response from the other, and they would basically translate into some sort of mechanical effect, something of the sort.
So playing with your brother.
No, playing with a friend. But the idea was that our characters in that first campaign we ever played were brothers.
Okay, I got you.
That sort of thing. And then nothing happened for a while, for about 5 years. And when I was at my first job, which was at Hewlett Packard, also back home, a friend called Nico basically asked me if I wanted to join into his World of Darkness campaign. And I had no idea what World of Darkness was.
But I bet you found out very quickly what World of Darkness was.
I very quickly found out about World of Darkness. That was New World of Darkness, by the way, not the old World of Darkness.
Gotcha.
And I got hooked. And most of my second big group of friends came from that session, that first session. And from then on, I never stopped playing role-playing games.
That's That's cool. I do like the fact that your first role-playing game was Warhammer Fantasy. Was it
Yeah,
first? All right, I gotta ask, was it first edition?
it was first edition.
Oh
Yeah,
man, that's the one where you get to like make a random roll for bed rolls. It's famous,
yeah.
man. I love that. That's incredible. But so now we went from the we went from Warhammer Fantasy First Edition, all right,
Hmm.
to now you're designing games. Where did that kind of like? And you said that you started playing games when you were working with a friend at work. You started playing games, but then take us from playing games to becoming a designer, because I think that's a question that so many people have, and it gets asked all the time on all the different interview podcasts. But I want to hear it from you. Like, how'd you get from that point, let's say point B to C?
Okay. So, well, I think it's like one of those things that everyone has some sort of creative drive,
Hmm.
right? And it tends to be that whatever it is that you get your creative outlet, or whatever it is that you basically have your media stuff kind of like flowing. I don't know if it's a TV show or if it's games, etc. Um, when you have to actually have that like creative input, or put something of yourself out there in the world, you tend to go to whichever medium it is that you frequent. And at some point, when I went to London, because basically I came to London because I wanted to be an actor, right? It was something that just piqued my interest in during the last kind of like year or so of me being in Argentina. So I basically quit university and I moved here, and that kind of didn't work out. It turns out.
You're like, okay, let me try to. I'm not going to be an actor. I'm going to be an RPG
Yeah,
designer. Okay, all right, I'm
yeah,
following
exactly.
you.
You'd be surprised. I mean, we had the people of Mesa Arcana visiting us recently.
This is true.
Hmm.
There's a
Yeah,
lot of
true.
script writers and actors who make it in tabletop RPG.
I guess
Yeah, no,
so. It kind
but
of like you think about it.
it's a different type of creativity, I think, that goes into it.
Yeah,
There's a much more like emotional connect, and physical connect with acting. Of course, it's nothing like doing world building, or game design. And I think that it was a matter of maybe at some point, I remember I looked at my suitcase and I realized that half of my suitcase was full of like World of Darkness books. So I'm like, what am I doing here? And yeah, I started to write this game in like a tiny London cafe in Canary Wharf.
So
So
my next question, as the London-based RPG Academy Network faculty member, oh, from this point, do you enter the welcoming industry landscape of tabletop RPG in London?
what do you mean?
I mean, you're there. You're considering writing for tabletop RPG. What is your first step uh,
All right.
in the industry?
Okay. Well, the first step in the industry was because then again it's all about like contacts and networking, and basically, and this is kind of like important, seeking a lot of feedback. I think that a lot of people that let's say make it in a way, they don't hold their idea to themselves, because there's so many people that are like, I've been designing these games for like 10 years, and of course you go and ask, okay, so when is it out, and what's it about, and what's happening with
yeah.
it,
Yeah.
and that's the thing. The thing is, once the idea kind of settled in, the first thing I did was to seek feedback, to play it with my friends at work. The first campaign happened at the RP Haven, which is a massive club here in the UK that has grown a lot since, well, since it started to kind of like branch out. That first campaign of Nibiru that we ran at the Stratford IP Haven kind of like began the whole process of development of the game, and a lot of people were very happy with it. And since then, I think the RP Haven has been running off and on Nibiru campaigns almost constantly.
Gotcha. So
Hmm.
now we've said it, and so now we've got to talk about it. All right. Can you, for those who don't know, what is the elevator pitch for Nibiru?
That's simple. It's a
Yes.
science fiction game of lost memories.
Okay.
Uh,
Perfect.
mhm,
It's a
basically.
this is the perfect elevator pitch. I hate it when I ask somebody an elevator pitch. They go on and on and on.
Yeah.
It's short, sweet. Tell me, hook me. Okay, so you say a science fiction game of lost memories. So
Hmm.
that's kind of what drew me in to the game, just because it was different. So
Yeah.
can you explain a little bit? Explain the world, because I think that's how so often people get hooked into these different
Yeah.
systems. It's so often it's not the
Hmm.
mechanics, it's the world. So
So it's the science fiction part
yeah,
that you want me to start doing.
yes.
Okay. Cool. So Nibiru is a space station that orbits the star Fomalhaut. It's basically a solar system not very far away from our solar neighborhood. It's a very particular solar system because it's basically just swarming with debris. It's probably a star that is still quite young, as far as I can remember. And so this space station takes debris and feeds itself with it. Now, the purpose of it is kind of unknown, but we do know is what happens inside. Inside, it just so happens that there is a group of people that have been living for a while and that have formed a civilization. And it's in the confines of this civilization that action happens. Nothing happens in this game outside of the station. If there's something outside of the station, the people there don't know. There's very just like well justified and well based reasons why this is that way. But that's kind of the gist of it. And of course, it kind of puts out there specific considerations with regards to the worldview of people that are basically living there, their mythology, the way they interact with the world, and all kinds of things that is really fun to kind of like tour around and explore.
I like the idea of a self-contained
Yeah.
system. I know personally in different campaigns I've run, those have always been what I think the best. It kind of it because it doesn't put you on rails, but it gives you kind of guidelines and walls to kind of play
Hmm.
within. And so one of the things I wanted to ask you about was um, Nibiru. It looks from the art, all right, and we'll talk about the art because it's like top notch, fantastic. But the whole
Hmm.
is it looking at the art, it seems like it's dark. So would you call this dark or science fiction? There seems to be almost it's a unique world, and I don't want to call it grim dark because I think that's different.
Oh no,
It's
it's not.
not. It's not at all. This looks like a very colorful, a vibrant world, but there's just something s- sinister about it.
Yes, I think that it's a bit uncanny and it's a bit otherworldly, and those traits can certainly be interpreted as frightening. And I think that the game we did a short kind of like adventure with guys at the Redmond Role Playing podcast, which is certainly horror based,
Yeah, those
but
guys.
then
Yeah.
yeah, it's a horror that is not Machiavellic or it's not like uh, it has some like themes of cruelty, but it's not particularly about evil,
Mm-hmm.
not at all. Um, so I wouldn't call it grimdark for sure.
No.
It has some dark themes because of the atmosphere of the station that,
Okay.
from our perspective, can be perceived as dark.
Okay.
It, in a way, it reminds me of a series I especially enjoyed, written by some the old sci-fi called "The Cycle of the Berserkers" by a gentleman called Saberhagen,
Mhm.
where you had machines which would consume everything in front of them. So yeah, it would remind you the Borg more recently, but I guess that's the most evil thing I would expect to find in Nibiru, the sort of things which are they're not evil per se. They will consume human beings as they go along.
Yeah, no, definitely. Because at the end of it, you can't call something that's part of the natural order evil just because of it consuming human beings or something
Yeah.
like that. We do have like scary stuff, but generally it's scary because it's part of nature,
Mm-hmm.
and nature is kind of uncaring.
I
And that's part of
especially I especially enjoyed the art you published at the beginning of your campaign, which showed a creature which is like a, I don't know, some kind of arachnids, but it
the
spends
mermaid.
time. We already talked about that. They spend time in a lake or something, and they grab human beings and they feed on them, sort of like in a Matrix style. But
Yeah.
the resulting hybrid is reminiscent of mermaids.
Yeah, and it's called the Mermaid. Uh, yeah, that was a bit of a dark twist on their mermaid's tale. But then again, that creature is inspired by an actual living organism.
Mm-hmm.
There is a sort of like I think it's a parasite that does this thing that basically just kind of molds itself with a host's kind of like nervous system, and makes it so that the host will tend to walk towards a body of water, and then the parasite kind of frees itself and from the body of the host and lays eggs or something like that. So that's stuff that actually exists on a much smaller scale, of
Yeah.
course.
You just blew everything up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You
Nice.
told me in the past that what you really wanted with Nibiru, you told that there were a lot of science fiction role playing games, but they they tend to go towards the pulp, the lasers, the fights, the action,
Yeah, the space
and
opera. Mhm.
and you are more into hard sci-fi, which
Yeah.
is something you can definitely tell in Nibiru. So, how did that translate in Nibiru? And you told me also of a few authors who inspired you.
Yes, most certainly. Basically, you have Alfred Bester, writer of The Stars My Destination. You have Arthur C. Clarke from like 2001, Rendezvous with Rama. You have Isaac Asimov, of course, of Foundation fame.
Yeah.
More like later authors like James S. A. Corey with the Expanse series,
Okay.
which is space opera, but it has some pretty big kind of like amalgam with like hard sci-fi. Yeah, basically those are my influences, and there's influences, of course, from manga and anime, because you have basically uh, for example, Sudomini Hayes' Buram, which is actually now in an animated form in Netflix, is probably the closest resembling setting to Nibiru.
What was that? One
Uh,
more time.
that's Buram. It's spelled blame with like an exclamation point at the end.
Ah, okay.
Okay, very cool. Because I've been crushing some Netflix anime lately, and so I'm gonna have to add that one to the queue.
Yeah,
Uh,
the landscape in that setting is it's
it's
very
it,
much alike Nibiru.
it's funny that you mentioned the Expanse because I for real got like vibes of like the belt so often when I was looking at some of the art,
Yeah.
which is very cool. So now that we've kind of talked about the setting, go ahead and uh, tell us a little bit about the actual mechanics because I'm not going to spoil it for you, but I absolutely love this core mechanic that you've come up with.
Okay. Well, like most role-playing games, you have a task resolution system. So it's a basic system to
Hmm.
resolve conflict. That is done using D4s, and the basis of it is that you roll 3 D4s, and if you get a 4 in one of the dice, you're successful. If not, you fail. Um, Contested roles, basically they work the same. So 3 against 3 or something like that. You roll, but instead of looking for the force, you add up the results and you compare. So if I roll 3d4 and I get a 6, my opponent rolls and gets a 7, I lose that contest. So that's as basic as it gets. The reason why it gets as basic as it gets with that is that I wanted to mainly focus on the memory mechanic, the memo system. which is the bread and butter of the game.
Which is, yes, this is cool. Tell us about
so
it.
the idea is that each of your character has a sheet called a journal sheet. Each journal sheet has 8 memory entries, and the idea is that each of these memory entries provides you with a bit of background of your character for you to fill, and a mechanical bit that is tied to it. Your character has a pool of points called memory points, which represent the potential for you to remember something. And whenever you're going to roll, you can choose to spend those memory points to create a memory. Essentially, it works like muscle memory. It's like you're doing something, and this motor function of yours basically springs that memory back to the surface, and you get to write. So the classical example would be I am at a boardroom and I'm basically trying to convince this person to like maybe accept my project or something like that. The GM asks me to roll, and I spend those memory points. I choose to spend those, and I write the memory saying that back in my previous life, I used to be a vendor or some sort of merchant, and I remember this one sale that I was doing to this guy, and this guy looked exactly like the guy I'm facing right now. So there's my association. I write that down in that kind of like I remember bit, and right below in the effect piece of the memory entry, I write +1 to salesmanship or something like that. Whatever you and the GM thinks it's the most appropriate. And that's the basis of it.
I must say that the system with me really hit a sweet spot because I started role playing games in the late 90s, and it was really aimed at a resolution system, resolving actions, etc., and not so much about driving the narration. But I am interested in other styles of game. I'm interested in things like Fate Core, etc. I haven't played those that much, but while I'm interested, at the same time, I'm sometimes struggling a bit with them because that's not what I've been doing most of my life. But Nibiru, it's kind of a meeting point between the two, and I just fell in love in with the system. And to be honest, I didn't read that much about the setting because I'm keeping myself to play it and discover as a player everything which is happening in that world. But I really love we were talking with Tom that how we like to use flashbacks, and in my case, even the idea of amnesia in games like Nephilim. But having this mechanical element, which is very straightforward and simple, and you build your character as you go because it could be good or bad memories. So you find out about your advantages and disadvantages. If I was comparing that to Legend of the Five Rings, as you go along, I find it really fascinating and very easy to adopt at the same time.
Yeah, it is. It is very easy. And the thing that it has that I kind of wanted to avoid, I wanted to avoid, for example, many games have brilliant ideas about how to like bring the themes or the narrative to life, but they stay at a point in which they don't build upon it. So my idea was that I'm gonna have a very simple task resolution system, and my memo system, the one about the memories, I'm going to build everything on top of that. So the basic point of it is that, yeah, you spend the memory points to make a memory. Now, if I were to give more of like a multidimensional kind of playing ground with that, is I'm going to tell you, well, you can spend more than the basic amount of memory points to make that memory more significant. So if you're spending 3 points instead of 2, if you're spending 5 points instead of 3, it means that that memory is more important to you, and it entails that you're going to get a bigger bonus when you write that effect. You will be able to not just determine your strengths, but your weaknesses. When you're rolling for something, and this is the most straightforward and most effective way of gaining memory points, you can choose to fail that roll and get a permanent penalty. You write the kind of background piece that tells you why you're not good at that, at selling whatever it is that you sell, and you get memory points in return.
I absolutely, I love the whole the negative approach to it because it's who you are as a character, and so it kind of makes sense from the standpoint that you always have this penalty. So, because what like Caleb was saying, one of the things that I'm not sure how many other people love to do it in my games with my players, we are always doing flashback scenes just to do them because we like doing them. It's what we do. And now we've got this mechanic that allows us to basically create our skills based on doing flashback scenes. So I'm just envisioning playing this with my group of players right now, and we're just gonna have it's it's gonna be like 3 hours of just flashback scenes that just for the tiniest skill. But then, so that's what I really enjoy about it. There's this really striking piece of art in the book, or I think it was maybe in the Quick Start guide that shows this guy with this like I don't know, he's some piece of metal or a weapon, and he's like wearing like tactical gear, and he's hitting something with it. But then in the background, almost like a washed out image, you see a similar person, same pose with a baseball bat, hitting a baseball. And I want to talk about that because one of the things I was thinking about is you say past lives. So, in the sense that, how does that, because it's not necessarily are you remembering something from your character's past, or is it a previous past?
It's more of a previous past, but it depends on the archetype. So
Okay.
Nibiru has such a thing as archetypes, which you've seen like in many games. The profession-based archetypes, the class-based archetypes. Now in Nibiru, the archetype is just it's called a habitat, but more than being a place, is a set of guidelines or framework within which you base your memories, the memories that you write. So the most straightforward one, and there's five, it's Bright Town, which is just a countryside village. So it's super relatable. It's easy to write in. If you have several people at the table, you can all come up with ideas of how this village functioned, what were your relationships within that, and then you write about it. But then you start to get with the rest of the habits, you progressively start to get more outlandish, and it gets weirder. Because for example, you have the wild, in which your memories are the memories of a creature. One of the creatures that you can see in our bestiary. So your memories are going to be about roaming around and interacting with other members of the species, and what happens to the pack, and what happens in this creature, like in an urban landscape or in the waters of like a reservoir in the Umbra, and stuff like that. You have a habitat that's the Dreamlands, which you remember stuff that's from other people's lives. So whenever you come in contact with like an NPC, you can basically check to see if there's a link to this person. If there is, you determine how significant it is, which tells you how many memories you can write with that.
Okay.
And the memories will be about those people.
So you could use the memo system in different ways then.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah. That's one aspect that I didn't realize, and just I can definitely see it like those more outlandish things being some very, very interesting role play scenarios. Very cool.
I mean, immediately, you should put a spoiler alert when you tell that story. You already told it to me, and I was like, oh, that's so great. And at the same time, I was like, I wish I found that out in game. But as a game master, immediately, or even as a player, you think that your character, you could develop your character, and at some point, maybe this character finds out that it's not his memories, but somebody else. He know, and yeah, there's so many twists and ideas you can come up with. I think there's a lot of shows actually nowadays playing with this idea of flashback, and maybe not exactly fake memory, but you rediscover events, and suddenly the point of view changes and the nature of the event change. Well, you could do that with the development of your character, I think.
Yeah, totally. And it because each habitat is very malleable in how they are. You can come up with really wacky stuff. Like for example, the Dreamlands, this idea of remembering stuff from other people. There was a particular adventure that we played that was centered about a Dreamlander that they had a pattern with regards to the people that they were linked with. And it just so happened that the pattern was they remembered everything about the lives of the members of a ruling council. So basically, being in contact with this person or having access to their memories and the remembrance would entail that you would get to know the secrets of a ruling councillor of a town, and that could be very dangerous. So it does open up like lots of different avenues for like creative storytelling and building adventures. The whole idea of toying around with memories. That's definitely something we want to explore.
I was
Oh, go ahead.
I was trying to remember where I saw plays with memories. Of course, one famous one would be Total Recall, so you could sell memories maybe of some kind if you want. And more recently, spoiler alert, in Attack on Titans, there was a play on this concept and the idea of a character always surviving and coming back to some fashion because his memory keeps being inherited by a line of people. So each time you got people who are like, I'm gonna have the power now and I'm gonna change everything. And the part of acquiring the power is acquiring the memory of that predecessor. And each time, generation after generation, when they acquire the power and the memory of the predecessor, they're like, yeah, actually, I understand with the memory of this guy, so I'm gonna follow the plan. As I'm not gonna be rebellious anymore.
Where did the idea of this system come to you from? Like, was it just something you wanted to do, or is there like this divine intervention that you had? Where like, I have it.
No, I did want to toy around with the concept of background that that interacts with the mechanics, like a justification of your mechanics. Of course, then I didn't want it to be just a justification of them. I wanted to build upon it. But for example, one of the things I remember doing was in one of my like when I was in Argentina, we were playing this World of Darkness game, and it just so happened that one of my friends did this really strange thing about strange. A way in which he spent experience points was to record which skills, which attributes he used across the section. So he would tick each one, and the ones that he used the most, those are the ones that he would invest experience points on. So that idea of like kind of like fleshing out your giving some logic to the things that you're fleshing out mechanically about your character was kind of the center point. Yeah, I think that's probably it.
You mentioned previously, I believe it's a game from Argentina called Inmoriam.
Yes. Inmoriam basically had some sort of like system in which you build some memories. I don't exactly remember how it worked, but it did give you like a small chart of memories you could have and a sort of like justification about them. I learned about Inmoriam later on because I actually didn't play it. But there's several games like that one and like Nibiru that have played with this kind of like concept. Penny for your thoughts or something like that, I think it was called, also does this sort of thing. But they do it to a certain extent. They don't base the entire premise and the entire mechanical kind of like structure of your game on recovering memories. That's kind of the objective with Nibiru, to kind of like produce a AAA game that's based around this whole system. And there's more to that, which I can go into.
No, you're good. I mean, and it really is. It's just something that I saw. This is, like I said, a year and a half ago. I was like, this is pretty sweet. It's just something different that I haven't seen before, which is I'm super excited to get it to the table. And one of the other things I'm really excited about, and I want to let everybody know, is that if you have no intention of playing this game, you should just go get the book just for the art. All right. I was talking to Kalum a little bit before we started that there's just I see this growing trend of just games coming out of Europe like being from the US, that these European games coming out, the art is just at a different level. I mean, you're talking about the guys like from Burning Games, and then Modifius, and then also then your game, Nibiru, and it's just like, so tell us a little bit about the art.
Okay. So to me, for example, the what really struck me about art in role-playing games was a Swedish game, Simbarum. You might know it.
Mm-hmm.
It's from Team Jarringen, who's just basically been merged into Fria Ligan, Free League. So those guys really hit the nail on the head with that thing. It's also a big part of why art is important, I think, in some of these games is when things really get outlandish, you really need to give a clear and an evocative image of what your setting is. You're asking your readers to imagine something that is not generally in their
Yeah.
scope. So having that really well fleshed out in the art, I think it was really important because I wanted my players to be able to picture themselves in the setting, and yeah, that's a hell of a task, and it's important to have good art.
Yeah, no, when you have these like this strange science fiction set, and you hit the nail right on the head. That art, it gives me that image for I've never seen like a this setting of Nibiru or anything close to that. It's so outlandish, and so to have that this great art, it's awesome. Who's your artist on this?
So there's several people
Yeah.
working on it, which it goes a bit about against the trend because this trend of like really high production values in art from Sweden actually
Yeah.
really revolves around one people working behind the scenes. So for example, Simon Stallenhag with Tales from the Loop,
Yeah.
and I can't remember the artist behind Simbarum, but it's just one guy. In this case, it was mainly three people that came together for Nibiru's art. First, it was Alexei Tretyakov, who's a Russian guy that did, he did the one about memory, the one with the guy with the bat, and did most of the stuff that you guys have seen in the early days at Nibiru. He's done a little bit of everything for the project. Then you have the lead designer that has done the bulk of the Nibiru art, who's Daniel Liang. He's from Taiwan. He has done mostly a lot of the environments and the landscape art for the game. And then you have Mahia Rodriguez, who's from the US. She started doing mostly everything that has to do with the bestiary
Okay.
and the creature design. And now she's moving on to landscapes and particularly illustrations relating to vagabonds and basically insert in the setting.
Gotcha. I mean, it really is. It's great. And then now that I kind of mentioned it, I should have brought this up right away. Let's talk about the Kickstarter, and also let's talk about the fact that you are now successfully funded. People are going to be getting this game.
This book.
So go ahead and go ahead and tell us what they can expect from the Kickstarter and what kind of things you've got planned. Just give us the whole rundown.
So they can expect a high quality hardback book, which is the main point of the Kickstarter. They can expect a Kickstarter campaign that is focused around making that book better. I want it's basically a two-way thing with how one product Kickstarters work for me, which is you want to keep your delivery times low. You want to reduce the risk of delays by having just one main product instead of promising a series of supplements and basic series of products that can delay the whole process. And at the same time, I like the idea that by working mainly on stretch goals based on the book, almost everyone is getting benefited from the lowest points. Because, for example, we have stretch goals that add art to the book, maybe, or a specific section about something in particular. So from the get-go, from the 20-pound pledge that gets you the PDF, you're already seeing benefits and returns for your stretch goals. So it entices you to actually go out and promote the game and help reach those.
Yeah, I like that idea of just getting a better quality core product. It makes sense.
I just think with this beautiful art, we need a game master screen.
You know what? That's a good idea, Kalum.
Yeah, that can come, but it can come in due time. And that's the other thing. We do have a set of physical rewards. Because, for example, if you check the stretch goals, the third one is dice. So a set of metal dice, cuneiform dice, because the game does have some sort of like ancient Mesopotamian influences. But then most of it is about making that core book better. So adding those bookmarks, adding UV, what's it called, embossing to the title of the book, getting a better paper stock, all of that kind of stuff, getting more art into the book. I think that's the main idea behind stretch goals.
The other thing about the Kickstarter, which I wanted to talk about, was you've got the 3 different levels for the 3 different settings. Okay, so this is all right. I was trying to think about this and how to say this nicely. This is like one of the meanest things, and then like the smartest marketing employees I've ever seen in my life, because it really is. There's not that much. It reading through the different pledges. There's the 3 different settings, and they all seem it's complete. Like it feels like complete, but all it does is then you have the one where you get all 3, and just it makes me want to have more. And so I could get like a complete thing, or I can get everything, and it's really just it's more material. So go ahead and tell me about you got 3 different settings for this?
Yeah, basically, and that's just delving a bit more on the nature of Nibiru and the ideas behind the setting. So Nibiru produces gravity via centrifugal force, so artificial gravity.
Okay.
The further away you go from the core of the station, things change. The weight of the world becomes stronger on your shoulders. Lights start to go dim. Stuff stops working. And the way in which this works kind of conditions the type of adventures and the types of stories that you tell. So the setting has 3 main regions.
Yeah, regions.
So you have the Umbra, and so like concepts related to light and shadow. So the Umbra, which is the place that's closer to the core, that's the warmest place, the place that has gravity that's a bit below the Earth's, so 0.8 Gs. And that's where your main like civilization flourished, and you have your big kind of like city states. So your social political games will happen there. The games that have to do more about the society of Nibiru's civilizations, etc. And then you have Penumbra. So Penumbra is different from the Umbra because it's actually a place where the station that in Umbra it kind of had a sort of like big life support system, and it kind of like did the whole upkeep of life. You didn't have to. You live in abundance basically in Umbra. In Penumbra, it's the other way around. Humanity has to adapt to the station, and not the other way around. So your games that are about adventure and survival happen there in these like sparsely populated colonies that are kind of struggling to find their place as civilization, and the mindset of humanity adapts to this idea of surviving in a scarcity, in a world of scarcity in a way. And then you have the Umbra, which is the place beyond, which is almost entirely consumed by the dark, and that's more about mystery. That's more about it does have its kind of like horror themes, and it's basically about civilization trying to make a stand against not just the darkness, but the fact that the weight of the world is now crushing you. And all of the different mindsets that stem from trying to live in this place. We have those three regions, and the three pledges kind of pose the idea that you landed on this particular part of the station,
Yeah.
and your adventure is going to kind of shape up to be in this kind of way. And that's more or less the idea of those three pledges that you can choose. They give you like a map of the region, an adventure set for you to start your journey within that region.
Yeah, I like that. It's like you can run three very distinct then campaigns within this world. Personally, I think I'm going for the Umbra. I'm going for Umbra.
Okay.
That's where I want to play.
Yeah.
I want to get weird. All right. Caleb, what were you gonna say?
Well, I like to start with the middle, and I think that's where we played. So I went for Penumbra.
Yeah, that's true.
Was it? Am I right? Is it where we played?
That is true. That's where you played.
I'm trying to post links to my content on the Twitch chat, but it's not available. If people want to check that actual play, which hopefully will be released as a video soon. Well, episode 22 of the Release Podcast, part 2, recorded at UK Games Expo. We ended up on a night under the rain that day. There's also a cool.
Oh my god, we're so tired that night.
It's not a convention if you're not playing super late and you're tired.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So one of the other things I wanted to talk about is just all right. So we're gonna talk business here. All right. So I'm in the U.S. I'm not over there with all of you amazing people. And so as a U.S. backer, what is the fulfillment like? So this is international then.
Yeah, it is international. We're doing fulfillment via Games Quest, and we've basically done our homework in that regard. I mean, you do have the average shipping costs for the US.
Expected.
So yeah, it's what it is. But then again, it's all a matter of like what's it called? Demand. We've had great demand in the US, and we're already looking into how many copies we're going to ship even after the Kickstarter.
Okay.
Because we're expecting to finance a print run that is big enough so that it can actually supply the US market. US market generally tends to go for at least 1,000 copies after like a successful Kickstarter of this size, more or less. So, for example, that is partly contemplated in the pricing jump from one stretch goal to the other, because we're trying to account for an increased demand in basically the printing quantity that we'll do. So you see, for example, the next stretch goal, which I think we probably are going to reach tomorrow, is at £10,000. After that is £13,000 for the next one. And that difference is basically what will make us, it will make it possible for us to print, say, 2,000 copies instead of 1,000, or even 3,000 copies instead of 1,000, so we can supply the market afterwards.
Okay.
Yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I talked with one of I believe the people in helping out with the logistics at GameQuest, and is that right that you're gonna look especially that your copies arrive to local friendly game shop as well as not big distributors? That it was very important for your team not to be just available on I don't know, Amazon or a big shop, but also in the small one, because sometimes I've heard that there's some hiccups with that with games.
Yeah, totally. Especially, it's really great to see that there's many like local gaming stores that try to help indie publishers. There's a closer relationship, I think, between some indie publishers and kind of like the local gaming stores. For example, in London, you have Leisure Games. Leisure Games is the prime example that they always try to stock some indie productions, and because this game is kind of like in that middle range, it's not a AAA like game in the vein of, I don't know, Pathfinder or D&D, but it has high production values, and it has an indie feel to it. So it's the idea is to kind of like make a deal with regards to that. But yeah, it's all in preparation at the moment.
Yes, going big.
Yeah.
That's the goal. With the there was real quick, Sprocketeer says that he loves the pic of the two kids running in the grass.
Oh yes, that's Bright Town,
Yes.
basically.
Yeah, there was the and I'm blanking. There I had an important question for you. I can't remember off the top of my head. That's gonna kill me now.
I can ask one, and you think about it in the meantime. Yes. I was listening. We had a little throwback Thursday today. I reposted the interview I did with you, which, by the way, you came to me at Dragon Meet and asked for an interview, which I thought was great.
Yeah.
So it was 2016. And I was wondering how things changed in your projects since 2 years ago.
So particularly with Nibiru.
Yeah, and I mean, is there anything you would say to yourself back 2 years ago? Or are things different in your project? Are there things you were expecting to do which changed with the game or with the product?
No, I think it's one of those like hard things. I'm not sure if I'm actually. Do I have sound?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I think yeah. Kalum had muted his. No, I think it's all learning process. The whole idea of like me going back and saying something to my previous self, I think it's we always try to make an effort, right? When tackling some like these kind of projects for the first time, and I wouldn't have it in a different way, because at the end of the day, it's all learning, and you got to do the missteps, you got to make mistakes. It's the same thing with mechanics. I think mechanics are probably one of the easiest to like observe, kind of like indicators of how you learn to make a game. There's a very particular thing that kind of exposes that in how I did the revelation system. So revelations, that's an interesting thing to chat about. You know how I told you that the memo system is not just the memories that you get, and it's more fleshed out, it's more nuanced.
Yeah.
And it's not just the fact that you get the negative memories and that you can spend more points to make something more significant. There's a system that's called revelations that basically gives you some sort of like trait called a revelation when you finish one of those journal sheets, one of those like 8 entry sheets. The idea is that revelations are supposed to give power to the way in which you write memories, or kind of like make memories interesting in new and exciting ways. So revelation of the poet means that once you acquire it, whenever you write a memory, if you do it in rhyme, you get a memory point back. Revelation of the storyteller entails that when you write a memory, if you leave the ending of that memory open, you can continue that story, and once you finish that story, you kind of cash in on memory points. And it's all of these, like this host of kind of traits that change the way you write stuff, that at the beginning I had designed to just be like just strange powers that the backgrounds that the protagonists of the games have. And eventually I realized that I'd much rather just not go with the conventional powers, even if they're unconventional, not go with like powers per se, but just to have every one of these kind of revelation thingies be about memory, and kind of give more value to my core memo system, the memory mechanic. And that's something that applies to the whole design process. The idea that first of all, you'll put your time into things that may not be the most important or the most essential. And as you go along and you get feedback on your project, which is again the big thing about like asking people for their opinion, etc., you start to realize what is it about your project that really has a lot of value and that really makes it unique. And as you go, you stop devoting time to things that are more, I don't know, kind of accessory, and you start devoting more time to the things that are important. So art is important. Getting the core mechanics of the game right is important, and reaching out to people and telling them about your game is important. So that's something that is a process.
That's awesome that you kind of tied those things together like that.
Reaching out, and we've got Sprocketeer in the Twitch channel asking a question.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the question is, can memories be shared/recovered by multiple characters at the same time?
Yes, there's many different ways in which something like that can happen. For example, we have several revelations that can induce memories or kind of like put memories onto other people. The habitat that we discussed before, the Dreamlanders, have the option of establishing a link with one of your fellow player characters if they do consent with that. So you can create memories of other people and feed them back. So there's several ways of you doing that. One of the probably the most common occurrences of this kind of like shared memory are memories related to traumatic experiences. So we do have a mental health system because we have basically body health, so the physical health and mental health. And certain traumatic experiences mark you in a way in which you'll never forget them, and that affects all of the involved most generally. So that's something that can translate in a memory, for example.
Cool. I just want to run a group of just all those people who can do that. It'd be just with this weird hive mind group of people running around. So before, it looks like we're starting to close in on time. So before we do that, though, I would just want to give us, Federico, just give us one more. Where can we find the Kickstarter? Where can we learn more about Nibiru? Where can we learn more about you? Where do we find you on the interwebs?
So you can find me on Twitter. I'm basically under the handle of Oracana1, which we can type that in, I guess, in Twitch. You can just search for Nibiru in Facebook, a science fiction game RPG of lost memories. That'll just pop in there. You can search me personally on my handle on Twitter, which is Sohns, so it's F as in Frank, SOHNS. And aside from that, just reach out because I love to talk about games and yeah.
Don't we all? Yeah, like I said, just Google it, people. Just Google it. Just do it.
And then go check the Kickstarter, which that's the name of the game.
And if you're in London, come to the Roleplay Haven, and you might run into.
Do come to the Roleplay Haven.
So the Roleplay Heaven in London?
Yeah, the Roleplay Haven is now at its 4th branch. So we have 3 branches in London, and we have a branch in Wales. And it's amazing because part of the proceeds that you pay for like your membership or like your entry fee to the game goes to charity. And they've done some really exciting stuff. They've managed to like I don't know, like get it like a new one of those like big machines for the hospital, for like Lewisham Hospital. They've done some really great work for the community, and it's just also great quality games.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's just great. Yeah,
listening to Calum's podcast and then listening to you say that, it just makes me more jealous of your all's RPG community over in London. Like it just sounds so amazing. I just want to come over there and just play games with you all. It'd be
Come
awesome.
over. That's the whole point of my podcast. I want more tabletop RPG fans to cross the pond and the channel and join us there. You know.
Well, I may be having some work there soon, so I will let you know. All right.
That would be
Yeah.
awesome. Yeah.
It would be. So then, Caleb, Rollis, tell us where we can find you. Thanks for joining us today.
Well, thanks for your patience with me and
Hey.
my son, who's got difficulties to sleep tonight.
That's okay. I have 3 myself, so the struggle is real.
First time on Twitch for him. You can find me on Twitter, iTunes, Instagram is quite popular, Facebook. It's Rollist, the Rollist podcast. Instagram, Twitter, it's Rollist Pod. So that's ROLISTES POD. So Rollist is French for role player. And yeah, we might have an actual play soon of Nibiru to post, so that would be awesome. And otherwise, we've got at least 2 interviews, maybe 3 with you already, Federico, somewhere in there. So they are properly tagged, so you can find them in the website. And yeah, it's quite cool to hear about the evolution of the game.
Yeah.
Very cool. And then finally, you can find me at Bezcar Tom and the RPG Academy at the RPG Academy. We stream on Twitch whenever we can. On Mondays, you can catch Lawful and Orderly. And then every other Wednesday, I'm running Waterdeep Dragon Heist with a group of crazy players. And Federico, thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to go ahead and throw the link for the Kickstarter up
thanks for having me.
in the chat. No, it's great. Caleb, thanks for kind of connecting us and get us
Always a
together.
pleasure. And thanks Procketeer for being in
Yeah,
the
absolutely. And it's always great when we get some active people. It just adds some more to it. So yeah, once again, thank you so much. Go check out Nibiru, guys.